COVID-19 has not only been a health crisis, it's been a political and diplomatic one too. And on that front, it's clear the world is deeply divided. When the Australian government suggested an independent investigation into where the virus started and how it spread, China was and remains outraged. Canberra's relationship with Beijing is now at rock bottom. Further complicating any hope of unity in the battle against COVID is the United States, where Donald Trump has been, well, very Donald Trump in his handling of the pandemic.
The worst efficacy is in 65 and older.
The world has never been in greater need of good science than during this pandemic. But being a good scientist can place you in harm's way. Not just from the virus.
Second term kicks off with firing Ray, firing Fauci.
But also the toxic, confounding and dangerous politics surrounding it.
I'd put the heads on pikes, right? I'd put them at the two corners of the White House as a warning.
Just ask American infectious diseases expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci.
My job as a scientist, a physician, a public health official is to protect the health and the welfare, not only of the American people, but of the entire world, because we live in a global community. All that other stuff, quite frankly, is noise that I don't pay attention to.
The pushback against you, though, has been quite personal, hasn't it? I mean, how extreme has it got?
Yeah, well, I've had people during charge times disagree with me, and we've kind of settled it out. But now to get death threats, to get my family harassed, my wife and my 3 children, I mean, that to me is absolutely preposterous. And there are some people that actually stoke that, encourage that.
As the crisis deepened in America, it became obvious that science and politics do not mix in the age of coronavirus.
When you do testing to that extent, you're going to find more people, you're going to find more cases. So I said to my people, slow the testing down, please.
None of us have ever been told to slow down on testing. That just is a fact. In fact, we will be doing more testing.
In August this year, I interviewed Dr. Fauci. It's hard to recall another scientist placed under this much public pressure. But the good doctor was also a good diplomat.
Dr. Fauci's made some mistakes. He wants to play all sides of the equation. We've listened to Dr. Fauci. I haven't always agreed with him, and that's, I think, pretty standard. That's okay.
How would you say you're getting on with Donald Trump these days?
Not bad at all. I mean, sometimes I don't see him for a while, and sometimes I see him, a couple of times a week. But our personal relationship is good. I know you can see in the papers there's this tension, but in reality, when you get in the same room and discuss things, that our relationship is fine. It's a good relationship.
When you see that the president has retweeted Fire Fauci, that he contradicts what you say about loosening up the economy, he sends out material of your supposed mistakes, media is briefed on that in an attempt to undermine you, that does not look like a good relationship.
Well, I would say it's complicated. How about that for a euphemism?
The President-elect of the United States of America, Joe Biden.
No doubt, Dr. Fauci's relationship with his country's next president, Joe Biden, will be more conventional and constructive.
COVID comes from China. Kung flu. It's not racist at all, no.
But whether America's and indeed Australia's relationship with China can be fixed is much more problematic. Such has been the political fallout of the coronavirus. In regards to the big questions from what you've seen so far out of China, did they lie?
Yes.
Did they cover up?
Yes.
In April, I spoke to former British diplomat to China, Matthew Henderson. Matthew co-authored a report for a legal class action against the Chinese Communist Party for the massive economic damage caused by COVID-19.
It becomes clear that the way in which the Chinese side has managed this issue is negligent, culpable, and deliberately, willfully damaging, not only to the world at large, but to the Chinese people also.
For Matthew, the most appalling part of the cover-up was quashing early concerns about a new frightening virus raised by Chinese doctors and scientists in Wuhan.
to make certain that people who really knew what that bug looked like, where it came from, why it was so infectious, why it bonded with people's lungs in a way that makes it uniquely lethal, that information was the first thing they suppressed that would have been really, really useful to the world to protect ourselves from what we now know is what it is, a lethal pandemic.
6 months on, Matthew accepts that the legal action has little chance of success because the true damage bill is impossible to quantify. But he feels the world may have learnt something far more valuable in the long run.
What instead I think we have got is a much more meaningful retribution, which is that an awful lot of people who previously had been pretty ignorant about China, or agnostic, or downright naive, now realise how wrong they were. We now know what the Chinese Communist Party does, how it behaves, with information that could have saved the world and has cast the world into an abyss of death and decline. And it did so knowingly.
So the virus has exposed China for what it really is, in your opinion?
It's shown us what the China virus is, which is the disease of the Chinese Communist Party, which has metastasized throughout its miserable country and spread further afield as well. And that can be cured and must be cured, and one hopes that someday it will be.
Do you accept that China has a responsibility for the crisis we see around the world today?
I think China was the first victim of this outbreak. It's like a meteor hitting some place on the earth. You can't blame the victim. The victim actually has been, suffering those heavy losses.
Earlier this year, leading Chinese academic Professor Chen Hong labelled Scott Morrison's call for an international inquiry into the origins and spread of COVID-19 as an act of open hostility towards China. Relations have never been worse. Well, why is it that China finds it hostile, finds it so offensive for an independent international inquiry into the origins and the spread of COVID-19?
Actually, this kind of investigation actually proposed by the Australian side is not an investigation. It's called an independent inquiry, talking about the lack of transparency. That is actually the problem, because actually there's no such thing as lack of transparency in China, in the Chinese side.
People who have worked with the WHO say that China lacked transparency. People within China accuse the administration of a lack of transparency. It's not just Australia.
Australia is being, acting as a kind of divisive, role, trying to, point fingers, even stab at the back of China. This is actually not fair.
All these months later, in terms of what we do know in regards to the responsibility or the blame game, if you like, what do we know about where this started? Who is culpable?
There is absolutely no doubt about responsibility, none whatsoever. This has already been ratified very clearly by the US government in the Foreign Affairs Committee of the House of Congress report in September. It's been expressed very clearly by the Australian government. It's been articulated extremely effectively, I should say, by your High Commissioner in London, Mr. George Brandis, when he said that China has now started weaponising COVID as a means of undermining Western democracy and claiming that its success against the virus in some sort of way proves its superiority. So all I can say is, don't believe a word they tell us, except that what they do tell us is not going to be remotely anywhere near the truth.
Hello, I'm Tara Brown. Thanks for watching. To keep up with the latest from 60 Minutes Australia, make sure you subscribe to our channel. You can also download the 9Now app for full episodes and other exclusive 60 Minutes content.